Inbounds it to Hamby, and so now that'll be that. So the Indiana Fever come into here after losing 3 of their last 4 on the
The Indiana Fever just pulled off what might be their toughest and grittiest win of the entire season, but the truth is, it almost didn't even count. With only a single-point lead in the dying moments of the game, the referees stepped in, handed the Los Angeles Sparks multiple extra opportunities that should never have been granted. Caitlin Clark and Sydney Colson wasted no time calling out the chaos, and fans quickly erupted in outrage. The real question is, why was this matchup so controversial, and how did the Fever manage to rise above everything stacked against them to keep their playoff push alive? Let's unravel the madness that unfolded in LA and see why this victory could alter the direction of their season. So, what's your take on WNBA referees? Drop your thoughts down in the comments because this one left everybody heated. Now, if there's one consistent theme running through the WNBA, it's the sheer incompetence that often comes from the officials in charge. Every time I sit down and watch a game, one question always pops into my head. How much money do these refs have riding on this? Take this Fever versus Sparks game as a perfect example. Those final few seconds didn't just feel tense, they felt endless. What was supposed to be 3.9 seconds of action somehow stretched into what felt like an eternity. It almost completely stole away Indiana's most important win of the year. With the Fever clinging to a 76-75 lead, the atmosphere inside Crypto.com Arena was electrifying. Both squads understood the stakes. Indiana sat in 6th place, while Los Angeles was just 2 spots behind them in the standings. In other words, one possession could reshape the entire playoff race. Every dribble, every whistle carried weight. But instead of letting the players decide the outcome, the refs inserted themselves over and over. And let's be real, everyone watching had the same stunned reaction Caitlin Clark wore on her face from the bench that night. People were looking around, confused, thinking, what in the world are we watching right now? It started with the Sparks, desperately searching for one last chance to steal the game. But rather than allowing the play to unfold naturally, the referees interrupted the flow repeatedly. The shot clock reset strangely. Fouls were mysteriously called on one end, but completely ignored on the other. Even when the Fever forced turnovers or played perfect defense, Los Angeles kept being handed new, inbound chances. These weren't long drawn-out sequences, but each stoppage stretched the moment and made the game feel suspiciously one-sided. Fans couldn't help but ask, just how many lifelines were the Sparks going to get? Now let's zoom in on one of the most crucial moments. The Sparks had 0.6 seconds left on the shot clock. The ball was inbounded, and to everyone watching, it looked like the game was over. But then, out of nowhere, the refs blew the whistle, called a foul, and declared that the game was still alive. So Kelsey Mitchell stepped up to the line. This was her chance to lock things down, but instead of icing the game, she missed both free throws. It was a shocking sequence, and while Mitchell should have hit at least one of those, the game kept rolling. In the middle of all that chaos, Aaliyah Boston stepped up and delivered the defensive play of the night. When the Sparks tried to force the ball inside, Boston ripped it away, giving Indiana life. The Fever quickly pushed the pace, and Mitchell ended up back at the line. With just 0.4 seconds left, her first shot rimmed out. That should have been the end of it. The game should have been over. But unbelievably, the officials gave the Sparks yet another inbound, this time with only 0.1 seconds showing on the clock. That call alone triggered fury from Fever fans everywhere. Realistically, how can any team run a real play in less than the blink of an eye? It just didn't make sense. And here's the part that really drove people crazy. At the end of the game, refs are supposed to be laser focused. You're telling me nobody noticed when the ball was touched? You're telling me they missed something that obvious? Then, to make matters worse, they handed LA a timeout. That's when fans and players alike started losing it. Look at Caitlin Clark on the sideline, waving her arms in disbelief. Like, what is even happening right now? Kayla was already set to push the floor, completely baffled by the nonsense. This wasn't paranoia either. The WNBA has seen multiple games this year with bizarre endings, awkward timing decisions, unnecessary whistles, soft fouls called in crunch time, and replay monitor confusion. Indiana just happened to be the latest victim of a pattern that screams either gross incompetence or something far more concerning. Social media exploded instantly. Clips of the 0.1 second inbound spread like wildfire, and fans across the country accused the league of embarrassing itself once again. Think about it, what can any team do with 0.1 seconds? The entire situation felt absurd. But despite the chaos, despite the frustration, the Fever refused to let the refs steal the win from them. Every extra opportunity the Sparks were given ultimately led to nothing. Boston's defense sealed the rim. The final buzzer finally sounded, and Indiana survived. What unfolded was less like a basketball game and more like a test of patience, a trial to see how much nonsense the Fever could withstand before walking away victorious. And honestly, the fact that they still came out on top makes this win even more incredible. The referees did everything in their power to tilt things, but Indiana's toughness shined through. And remember, this team wasn't even at full strength. Their biggest star, Caitlin Clark, was still sidelined and not cleared to return. Sophie Cunningham, one of their most dependable scorers, was also unavailable. Guards Sydney Colson and Ari McDonald were both missing, stripping the Fever of energy, pace, and ball-handling depth. And then there was Lexi Hull, who stepped onto the court with not one but two black eyes from a brutal collision in the previous game. Looking at that lineup before tip-off, most people assumed Indiana didn't stand a chance. Even Hull herself spoke about it afterward. Steph White said every time she sees Lexi with those two black eyes, she smiles not out of mockery, but because it symbolizes toughness. Hull said people keep apologizing when they see her face, but she doesn't need sympathy. When she's playing, she forgets about it completely. It's only when she looks in the mirror later that she remembers they're even there. And despite the injuries, despite the bruises, she could still see just fine. Nothing had changed. That kind of grit became the story of the night. From the outside, this game looked like LA's perfect chance to bury Indiana's playoff hopes. Missing Clark's shooting and Cunningham's spacing left the Fever with limited offensive options, while Colson and McDonald usually help carry the point guard load so Mitchell doesn't have to do it all herself. On paper, it was supposed to be a mismatch, but basketball has a funny way of ignoring the script, and one veteran decided to write her own chapter at the Sparks' expense. Odyssey Sims turned back the clock and gave Indiana exactly what they needed. She poured in 21 points, slicing her way into the paint, finishing tough looks, and calmly scoring the final 5 points of the game herself. Once a member of the Sparks, Sims came back to haunt them, delivering the dagger that secured Indiana's survival. Meanwhile, Aaliyah Boston proved once again why she's the cornerstone of this franchise. Her stat line showed points and rebounds, but the true story was dominance. She protected the rim with authority, snatched rebounds against double teams, and made life miserable for LA in the paint. Offensively, she provided screens, second chance opportunities, and steady post play that kept Indiana afloat whenever things stalled. Without her, that chaotic ending could have easily swung the other way. And Lexi Hull, she fought through pain, logged heavy minutes, and embodied the Fever's toughness, diving for loose balls, sprinting back on defense, and knocking down a clutch three. She showed what next woman up really means. Kelsey Mitchell may have faltered at the free throw line, but her constant offensive pressure kept LA's defense occupied all night. Even when her shots didn't fall, she demanded attention and created space for teammates like Sims and Boston. That willingness to carry responsibility, even under pressure, displayed the leadership Indiana desperately needed. In Clark's absence, head coach Stephanie White also deserves credit. She pieced together rotations that leaned on defense, toughness, and selflessness. This team has depth, and while not everyone gets minutes, their willingness to buy in and sacrifice for each other is what kept Indiana alive. This game wasn't just about survival. It was about proving they could thrive even with half the roster missing. And here's the kicker. Caitlin Clark didn't play a single second, yet she still dominated the conversation after the final buzzer. Between her visible frustration on the sideline, her leadership presence, and her role in highlighting the absurd officiating, Clark once again became the face of the story. That's what made this Fever Sparks showdown so unforgettable.